Hi everybody, welcome to Relationship Poetry Lesson 3, looking at the poem How Do I Love Thee, or Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So for today's lesson you'll need to go to page 8 of your anthology, where you'll find today's poem, and remember to do your boxes for the different areas we're going to focus on. So a box for structure, a box for comparison, a box for argument, and a box for context. So, as always, our key questions for this lesson are, first of all, to understand what is Barrett Browning's message about relationships, and secondly, how does she use language, structure and form to convey her messages. So like we did with the last two poems, let's begin by looking at the title. Now, one of the strange things about this poem is that the title is taken from the first line, and the title is a question, and the question is, how do I love thee? So I want you to think about, first of all, what does this question actually mean? What does it mean, how do I love thee? And then secondly, what is the effect of beginning a poem with a question? Why might Barrett Browning have chosen a sonnet as the form for this poem? So have a think about that. Make some notes using a pencil by your title on page 8. Once you're ready, press play and we'll go through this title and we'll go through this poem. So, how do I love thee? Now, I think one of the major effects of starting with a question is that it indicates the poem's job is going to be to answer that question. So Barrett Browning begins in the first line with the question, how do I love thee? And then she tries to answer it. Now notice this question is not about whether she loves somebody, but almost about trying to understand what that love looks like. So we know that she's in love with somebody, but what she wants to work out is how. So how is that love going to show itself? And of course what we should have said is that sonnets are traditionally love poems. So by choosing a sonnet, she's chosen the traditional form that people use to write about love. So just a reminder again, make sure you're keeping your notes organised. Hopefully you've done this with the first two poems. Remember to do your boxes. So if those haven't been done yet, please pause and do those boxes, because that's where our information is going to go. And make sure you're keeping all these notes nice and clear so we can use them for writing in a few lessons' time. So again, to begin, I want you to pause the video and spend about 4 or 5 minutes just reading this poem to yourself, trying to understand it. Remember to focus on who is speaking. So again, is it first person? Is it third person? Is it the poet who's speaking, or is the poet writing as a character? Work out what's happening in the poem. So what do you think she's talking about? Again, use pencil to make your annotations. And lastly, look at the structure. And we know it's a sonnet, so we can look for things like rhyme, we can look for the meter, we can look to see whether there are patterns in this poem as well. So again, make your marks in pencil. Once you've had a little read of it, and you made a couple of notes, then press play and we'll go through this poem in more detail. Okay, so firstly, let's talk about structure and form. So in our structure box, we can make notes on what we have here. So first of all, this is a sonnet, like Shakespeare's sonnet from last lesson. However, this is a different type of sonnet. Whereas Shakespeare wrote what we call Shakespearean sonnets, Barrett Browning writes in what we call a Petrarchan sonnet. Now this is named after the Italian poet Petrarch, who was the person who is believed to have invented the sonnet form. Now in many ways it's similar, so you still have 14 lines, it's still about love. However, the major difference is the structure is different. So with a Petrarchan sonnet, what we have is it's split into two. So the first 8 lines are what we call an octet, and this is where the poet presents a problem or an idea that needs to be answered in the second half of the poem. Now the structure of that is what we call envelope rhyme. So it goes A, B, B, A, B, B, A. So the outside rhymes wrap around the inside rhymes. What you'll then see at line 9 is a sestet, or a 6-line part of the poem, where the poet offers a message or a solution or an answer to the problem they've posed. And again, this one is done in cross rhyme. So it goes CD, CD, CD. If you want to check out these rhymes, you can just mark the ends of each of the lines with the letters and see how it looks. It is an iambic pentameter, so we do have 10 syllables of iamb, so upward beats. and it is a first-person speaker. So it's most likely the poet herself talking. And as you'll see from the context, it's quite clear who and what Barrett Browning is talking about. So, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now, her context is really, really important. I'm just going to read this to you. Again, please don't write all of this down. You don't need to. But you might write down maybe 3 key details that would have influenced her to write this poem. So she was born in 1806 to a very wealthy family, and she was one of 12 children. Her family made their money from Jamaican sugar plantations, so her family were a slave-holding family. At 14 years old, she developed a lung illness that required her to take morphine, so a drug which essentially removes pain, the rest of her life. And the following year, she suffered a spinal injury that would serve as another setback. So she was somebody who lived a lot of her life in incredible pain. Both from her lung condition but also from her spine condition. She was almost always in pain, and she'd take a lot of drugs and medicine to try and control that pain. As well as this, she was deeply religious, so her writing often looks at Christian themes, something which is in all of her work, and the idea of the power and beauty of God over somebody's life. Her collection of poems caught the attention of a fellow poet, Robert Browning, who essentially wrote her a letter saying how much he admired her. And this letter, and they exchanged about 600 letters over a couple of years, led to their lifelong romance and marriage. So Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Browning is the surname of her husband who she married. She was originally Elizabeth Barrett. They wrote each other 600 letters over 2 years, and they married in secret. The marriage was a marriage of love. Now, in these times, that was quite rare. Women usually got married to whoever their fathers chose. Her father was very upset about this and cut her off completely. So she moved with Robert Browning to Italy, where they lived the rest of their lives. And the poem How Do I Love Thee, which is probably her most famous poem, was published in a collection called Sonnets from the Portuguese, which she wrote because they were quite controversial, because in these times women weren't really supposed to write about their feelings. She pretended they were translated from Portuguese when actually they were her own inventions. She wrote these in secret and then dedicated them to her husband. So we can be pretty sure that this poem about love is dedicated to her husband, Robert Browning, as a man who loved her very strongly, but almost in a way saved her from a life of illness and misery through his passionate love. So it's a very, very positive poem, unlike maybe something like Funeral Blues, which is about the loss that comes with loving somebody and them dying. So let's have a look at the poem. We'll go and we'll annotate this now, so please grab your pens and we'll go to annotate. Okay, so let's begin, as we do, by going through the octet and seeing what the question is that Elizabeth Barrett Browning is posing. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Okay, so start here with a question. Now notice the question feels it's quite a casual question. It's almost as though she's actually asking him herself, like, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. So of course, if you have to count the ways, she's saying there are many. There are many ways. But notice again that there is no question here of whether she's actually in love with him, but actually the ways in which she loves him. I love thee. Now this line here, I love thee, meaning I love you, in an old-fashioned form, is repeated a lot throughout this. Now the technique we use here is called anaphora. Anaphora, which means to repeat the same opening line over and over again to emphasize. So here clearly, the thing that's being emphasized is the word love. And I love you. To the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. So now these here are all measurements. So it's kind of like she's trying to say, almost like she can measure her love. It's something that is quite physical. But then notice she says, my soul can reach. Now, of course, the soul is something non-physical, so almost like a spirit. So the extent of her soul, as high as deep as it goes, as wide as it goes, because breadth means width, and height. So as low, as high, as wide, her whole soul is filled with his love. When feeling out of sight, the ends of being and ideal grace. Now, being here means her existence. And ideal grace, now the word grace is a synonym for God. So she loves him as far and wide and high as her soul can reach. And even when she can't see it, even when it's gone beyond this, she loves him to be all of existence and beyond God. Now the key word we want to use here is the word transcendence. So it goes beyond life. It is bigger and more powerful than life itself. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. Okay, so notice here again, I love thee repeated. Every day's most quiet need. Now this here, so in the quietest moments, by sun, which is day, and candlelight, which is night. So all those little times, so we have the big stuff here, right? All the big breadth and height and power and God and existence, but also in the small moments, in the little moments of day and night. So her love fills everything. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. Okay, so I love thee freely. Now, freely means without anyone telling her to. So it is her choice. So no one is making her love him. Now you've got to think that might seem obvious, but remember, in these times, women didn't choose who they loved. They were forced into marriages and relationships. So she loves him as men strive for their rights. So as men fight for their freedoms, fight to be right, she loves him. And she loves him purely as they turn from praise. So again, the love of him is free, but also the love of him is, so purely means that it's for no gain. There is nothing that she's gaining from loving him apart from love itself. In the same way that men turn away from being thanked for things, or men refuse to do things for praise and thanks, she loves him for no reason apart from love. So it's her choice, and there's nothing she's gaining from it apart from love itself. Now that, if you like, is the end of, if we draw a line through here, that is our octet. We can write this here, octet. So that's our 8 lines. Now essentially, we have to ask, what is the question she's asking? She's stating that her love for this man is bigger than anything else in the world, bigger than God, bigger than life itself. It's so big it can't be measured, and the love is pure and free. So this seems very, very positive, very, very good. So we might be asking ourselves, well, what is she going to answer in the second part? Let's have a look. So this is your sestet, this second part. I love thee with the passion put to use. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. Okay, now this is a little bit of a twist or a change here. So I love thee with the passion. Now the passion usually means sort of like anger. So the anger used in my old griefs and my childhood's faith. So old griefs means old issues. Now, of course, we know that Browning had issues with her health. So we'll add her health here. And childhood's faith. So a belief in better. So her childhood, as we know, was pretty bad. So she's taken the anger she felt from her old childhood, the pain of her health, and her belief in better, and that passion has been put into loving him. I do love thee with a love I seem to lose. Okay. With my lost saints. Now, saints are, let's bring this down. Saints are like religious idols. So it gives a sense that actually she lost, when she was younger, she lost hope. As a religious person, she lost her faith. She lost her love of God. She felt like her life was nothing, miserable. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. So there's an idea here that the love is eternal. As we said, it transcends, it's transcendent, it goes beyond life. So she loves him with smiles, tears, so joy, the joy and sadness of her life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. So I suppose when we're thinking about what she answers is here in the octet, she says that she loves him more than anything else in life. But then the sestet says, actually, the love isn't just this amazingly pure thing, but the love saves her from a miserable life. And actually, the love is more powerful than life itself. So we can add these down to our arguments in a minute. So number one, that love is more powerful than anything else in the world. Actually, that love has the power to save people, to save us. So I'll add these down here. Love saves her from misery. And then up here, octet, love is more powerful than all. So you go. That is Sonnet 43, a really, really positive sonnet about Elizabeth Barrett Browning expressing her love for her husband as something which is stronger than anything else in the world, that is not based on other people's choices or for monetary gain, and that actually this love saved her from her misery of her life and is something which goes beyond life itself, and that one day she will love him in heaven in a stronger way with God. So very, very positive. Little bits of negatives in there, but the negatives are there to show the power of love in saving a person's life. So last thing we're going to do is going to do our arguments. So again, I've got these for you to have a look at and try and find some different techniques to go over them. So first argument we want to say, like we said a minute ago, was the number one, argues to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So through How Do I Love Thee, Barrett Browning argues that love is a beautiful, overwhelming emotion. So those first 8 lines show the power and beauty of love as something which is better than anything else in the world. And then the second one, in the second part of the poem, in the last 6 lines, Elizabeth Barrett Browning argues that love has the power to overcome death, that love saves her from this terrible childhood she has, that's the power to overcome death. So once you've written down your arguments, again, use 2 different colour highlighters. So give argument 1 one colour and argument 2 a different colour, and then find me quotes and techniques that match. Remember, for argument 1, the quotes will come from the first 8 lines, and for argument 2, quotes will come from the second 8 lines. So the second 6 lines, the sestet at the end. And again, once that's done, press play and we'll just wrap up this poem and come back and talk about it. So again, these were our key questions today. So what is Barrett Browning's message about relationships? Well, hopefully we'll understand that she sees the power of love as something very important. She sees love as something that's more powerful than anything else in the world. It saved her from the misery of her childhood and her old life, and she believes that love has the power to transcend death. And again, you've gone through and you've chosen the techniques that you think are best used to show that argument. So we might talk about things like the use of the sonnet form, the use of the anaphora to keep repeating the phrase I love thee, the use of all the biblical language, so references to God and to saints, and then all the exaggeration as well about the depth and breadth and height and her soul.